In this video, it's how to change the front brake pads on a Corsa D. I won't be changing the discs, however, you can get to the discs by removing the brake caliper, which I will be doing in this video. The Corsa D I'm working on is a 2010, however, they all are pretty similar. Once you know how to change the brake pads on one car, they're pretty much all the same, 99% of the time. As with all my videos, I'm going to fly through them to minimise your watching time, so if you like them, hit a like. With this one, beware, some of the calipers, the pistons, don't push back so easy. Some of them have a twist motion, some of them you can push back. Now it is best advised to use a tool. I'm always on a budget though, so I have found a way around it, but it is a fiddly job. So I thought I'd warn you before you go into it. So you can do this if you're not a mechanic by following the video, but please watch the video before you get going onto the job. Okay, let's get going. The tools I'm using is a screwdriver set, however it's not necessary. Halfords tool set, only a select few tools. You've got a wrench there, but you can use mole grips. Just a normal jack for the seal jack that comes with the car, a pair of pliers and the locking wheel nut if you've got one. First thing, get the bonnet open and open the brake fluid reservoir, because that will fill back up as you're pushing the caliper back. These tools I'm using, these are to lever the piston on the caliper. This is a 17 on a ratchet just for the wheel nuts. Again, to lever the piston. Pliers just to get the caps off the wheels. 13mm for the nut on the caliper. And this is just for the safety nut on the wheel. I'm using a standard seal jack. Get it on the seal, and before you jack it up, crack the nuts. Just so, just 1/2 a turn, just crack them loose. And you're going to have to do that on all 4 nuts. After it's jacked up, remove the nuts and then remove the wheel. As a safety precaution, always put the wheel underneath the car. I'd rather it crush and ruin my alley than lose a hand. Now when changing the discs and pads, you can change the discs as well. But it's not in this video, but if you want to change the discs, you can do it in the same procedure, but once the caliper's off, you undo the 2 screws at the front and that will remove the disc. I'm not going to change the disc because it isn't pitted, but if you've been using your brakes when they've been worn down metal to metal, you'll probably need to change the discs, but I'm on a budget, so let's get cracking. On the back of the caliper, you have 2 nuts that follow this route through, not the big nut at the back. Avoid the big nut. This is this nut. This is a 13 on my car, might be different on yours, and there's also one here on the bottom. The 1 nut here, 1 nut here. So we're going to undo that. Clockwise is do up and anti-clockwise is undo. However, if the nut is facing the opposite direction, everything's reversed. So anti-clockwise will be do up and clockwise will be undo. So I'm going to get off the phone and I'm going to turn that clockwise and release both nuts. Clockwise when the bolt's facing away from you. Now the reason I'm using a spanner is because the brake line is in the way, the brake line here, and the socket won't go on it. So let's get that off as quick as possible. Now once that's released, this caliper will be able to pull away. You may need a screwdriver to lever it away. Simple as that. Next step is to get the pads off. Now you can see the pads here, 1 and 1 on the back. Now this one's very low, as you can see, just about to go through to bare metal. Once that's removed, Get the top part of the caliper up so you can see it. There's the piston, and this turns clockwise to push the piston back in. Now sometimes you might need some pressure on this whilst you turn it. Good for a second pair of hands, but I managed to do it, and I'll show you a way to do it without the proper tools. I'm going to need my second hand for this, but I'm going to use this tool or a pair of mole grips to hold the outer edge of this metal piece here without disturbing the rubber. So just on the outer piece, because you don't want to ruin the rubber seal. And you're going to turn that clockwise, and as that rotates clockwise, it will slowly push back in. Sometimes the piston will only go back halfway while twisting it, and then all of a sudden it comes free flow. If that happens, put the old brake pads in to position. Now it's going to be hard with my holding my phone at the same time, and then using 2 bars, lever them away from each other. So pushing away from each other, and that will push the piston back all the way back into its seat. So you have to lever the piston all the way back using the old brake pads so you don't damage the new ones, and that will push the piston right back into the caliper without using the tool. However, using the tool will be a lot more safer and easier, but again on a budget. Next, get your brake pads, your new brake pads with all their meat on them. Set it up in the right place, and they simply push into place. And again on the back, hard to do it with one hand again. A little bit of fiddling, they are on. And then the next, these 2 push in and out. So using both hands, one to hold the piece back, and then 2 push the caliper on place. Now that caliper won't push in unless you push these back, as you can see, but I'll need both hands to do it again. With the caliper back in place, put the nuts back in and tighten them back up at the top and the bottom as tight as you can go. Once that's up tight, take the wheel back out and bolt it back on. Remember, once you've dropped the wheel down after getting off the jack, re-tighten the nuts as hard as you can, and please don't forget after 30 miles of driving to re-tighten your nuts, otherwise your wheel may come off. Once you're done, repeat to the other side. I've already done my other side. Check your fluid level, might be in a different place on the car, and if it's at the right level, put it back. Now keep in mind, when you get in your car, your brakes are not going to work immediately, as in the pedal is going to go to the floor. Pump it a few times, and once you feel the pressure there, a little bit of pressure behind the brake pedal, your brakes are ready to go, but they will not work at full capacity. So drive carefully and let them bed in. So let's have a quick recap. Before you start, you want to make sure you've got all the tools. You want the reservoir lid off of the reservoir bottle underneath the bonnet, as the fluid level will rise as you push the piston back on the caliper. Use the wheel underneath the car as a safety in case the car falls off the jack, because otherwise it would take one of your limbs instead. You can use some copper slip on the back of the brake pad on the metal side, not on the carbon side that actually touches the disc. So on the metal side, and that'll stop the caliper or the piston vibrating. And you've heard a brake squeak. I've never really had a problem with it, and if I do get it, I'll give it a jet wash in the brake caliper, which gets all the brake dust off. If you put some copper slip on the back, it can minimise the brake squeak. The pistons do turn clockwise to retract them back into the caliper, and they push anti-clockwise, obviously push them out further. Once you turn them clockwise, sometimes they do get stuck. Mine actually got stuck on the first wheel. So what I had to do, I had to get a second pair of hands to lever the piston in, using the old brake pads as a good bed, because you don't want to put the new brake pads in and ruin the carbon that touches, I think it's called carbon, that touches the disc. And then you lever that back whilst someone else turns the piston clockwise, and that will get it moving again. So that's a good way of getting the piston right back. You don't want to split the rubber, because otherwise you'll get dirt into the piston shaft, which can cause further problems in the future. Make sure you do your nuts up on the caliper as tight as you can by hand. Again, with the nuts on the wheels, make sure you really tighten them as tight as you can go, because in garages they use nut guns. And after 30 miles of driving, re-tighten your nuts. At least check them, because you don't want your wheel to come off. And finally, check your fluid levels. Make sure you've got enough fluid in the reservoir. Make sure it hasn't overflowed. You might want to put some tissue around the top of the reservoir itself where the brake fluid goes. So if you're pushing the piston back and it does overflow, where you've topped it up as the pads were wearing down, it will overflow onto the tissue and not all down your engine bay. So that's a good, because keep in mind, brake fluid is also a kind of paint stripper. If you leave it on your paintwork, it will go through to bare metal by the morning. So that's one to keep an eye out for. And a final thought, safety first. Your brakes will not work at their 100% capacity. They will take a while to bed in. After a couple hundred miles, they will work perfect, but they might, you might feel like they work really good, and they do. They are new pads. Just keep in mind, when you put your foot to the floor, as soon as you get in the car after doing the pads, you need to pump it up. You need to get the fluid back through to the calipers for them to start working again. So hopefully you like my video, and if you do, subscribe, like, and I'm glad I could help you.